This is VOA Africa.
Good evening, I'm Esther Githo. It's Thursday, September 5th. This is Africa 54. Pope Francis is greeted by thousands as he arrives in Mozambique for three-nation Africa visit. We'll reveal how the African Union is using culture to promote an African renaissance. And we'll have the details on how Kenyan farmers are benefiting from insured loans. The South African government is acknowledging Thursday that prejudice was partly to blame for deadly rioting that has targeted foreign businesses. Those attacks and reprisals overshadowed the World Economic Forum conference in Cape Town. President Cyril Ramaphosa had hoped the conference would serve as a window for his efforts to revive South Africa's ailing economy and boost intra-African trade. But the backdrop of violence is dominating the proceedings, exposing dormant tensions between the host country and Nigeria. At least 5 Africans have been killed this week in attacks on foreigners in South Africa. In Abuja, Nigeria's Information Minister Lai Mohammed said its High Commissioner to South Africa is being recalled. South Africa's embassy in Nigeria was also closed after the staff received threats. Now, South African companies MTN and Shoprite closed stores in Nigeria on Wednesday after attacks on their facilities. It appears to be a retaliation after days of riots in South Africa, chiefly targeting foreign-owned businesses. David Doyle has this report.
Foreign-owned businesses in South Africa and Nigeria are under siege, leading major businesses to close their doors on Wednesday. South Africa's MTN and Shoprite closed stores in Nigeria on Wednesday after their facilities were attacked. That was in retaliation for riots in South Africa. It targeted foreign-owned companies, including Nigerian businesses. Nigeria is telecoms operator MTN's biggest market and accounts for 1/3 of the South African group's core profit. Supermarket chain Shoprite said several stores in South Africa, Nigeria and Zambia were closed, and extensive damage had been caused over the past 24 hours. South African police have arrested almost 300 people and confirmed several deaths after the conflict in Johannesburg and the capital Pretoria in recent days. Meanwhile, its President Cyril Ramaphosa told officials and business leaders also on Wednesday that he was committed to quelling attacks on foreigners that have threatened to cast a cloud over an economic forum aimed at boosting intra-African trade. This latest wave of unrest in South Africa rekindled memories of violence and strained diplomatic relations with Nigeria. Though it's unclear what ignited the latest round of riots in South Africa, high unemployment frustration with limited economic opportunities have been cited as possible triggers. Nigerian President Muhammadu Buhari said Tuesday he was urgently sending a special envoy to meet with Ramaphosa to secure the safety of lives and property.
David Doyle of Reuters with that report. Now, Pope Francis received a warm welcome as he was met by thousands of excited Mozambicans Wednesday, including President Filipe Nyusi, as he began his first papal visit to Southern African country. The pontiff landed Wednesday night at Maputo's airport to a jubilant crowd. Many women wore capulanas, traditional Mozambican cloth printed with colorful images of Francis. In a recorded message released ahead of his arrival, the Pope addressed Mozambicans in the nation's dominant language, Portuguese.
I invite you all to join my prayers so that God, Father of all, strengthens reconciliation, fraternal reconciliation in Mozambique and Africa, the only hope for a strong and lasting peace.
The Pope also met Thursday with lawmakers, youth and clergy, giving 3 speeches. The pontiff is scheduled to lead a mass on Friday. After Mozambique, Francis will travel to the island nations of Madagascar and Mauritius. Now, for more on the pontiff's visit to Mozambique, I'm joined live via Skype by VOA's Southern Africa correspondent, Anita Powell. Good evening, Anita. Fill us in on what the Pope told Mozambican lawmakers today.
Well, it's been a full day, but it was interesting when he met with lawmakers this morning, he really put the onus on them to secure peace. He said peace is not just an absence of war, it's an active process. It's something that needs to be guarded and needs to be maintained. And it was interesting that he said this both to the head of the ruling Frelimo party and the head of the opposition Renamo party. So those were quite strong words.
And what's next on his itinerary?
Tomorrow he'll go lead a mass at a stadium just out of Maputo, and he's also going to go to a hospital and see patients at the hospital. And that's when, after that, he'll depart to go to Madagascar and Mauritius.
Anita, we know that the pontiff has expressed his concerns about environmental issues. Did he make any mention of this issue at all today?
He actually stressed that in his opening remarks to lawmakers. He said, I want to be sure that the first words that I say are in solidarity and sympathy with the people of Mozambique who suffered from not one, but two cyclones this year. That's Kenneth and Idai, that destroyed large parts of coastal Mozambique. So he did sound the alarm on that and urged reconstruction and as usual, unity, peace, and development.
Now, Anita, anything else that you've observed with the pontiff's visit in Maputo? Because we know usually he has some interesting things to do whenever he goes to African countries. Have you observed anything peculiar this time?
I've noticed three things. The first thing that I've noticed is that today he hasn't yet made mention of the horrible violence in South Africa. And I wonder what his motivation is for not bringing that up. Hopefully he will bring that up tomorrow. Second thing is his entire delegation is staying at a Chinese-owned hotel, which is interesting as we know that the Chinese government does not approve of organized religion. And so it's interesting that I have the head of one of the world's major religions staying at a Chinese hotel. I wonder how the Chinese government feels about that and how the Vatican feels about that. And then the third thing, of course, as you mentioned, are these lovely capulanas. It's very Mozambican. These are extravagantly colorful wraps that women wrap themselves in with images of the Pope. And the three words that I think are really the pillars of his visit, and they are hope, peace, and reconciliation.
What else did the Mozambicans expect to hear from the Pope? I know he also spoke to the youth. Anything that you heard them say, this is what we expect to hear him say?
They echoed, actually, their older counterparts' hope that the Pope would talk about peace and reconciliation. Because, as you remember, this is a nation that had a 16-year civil war that only ended in 1992, and then conflict never really died down. It's been brewing very slowly since then. So this is a country where entire generations of people have only known conflict. And so both old and young alike want peace in Mozambique, and that seems to be the overarching, overriding desire for Mozambicans.
Anita, where is the Mass going to be held tomorrow?
It's going to be held outside of town in a place called Zimpeto. Interestingly enough, it's going to be in another Chinese-built stadium. There's a hospital right near there, and it's quite a ways out of Maputo. The Pope did say that he wanted to make it to the rural areas that were affected by the cyclone, but it just wasn't possible. He didn't make it clear why that is, but it is quite difficult to get out there, and there are some security issues in the countryside in Mozambique. But this is as far as he's going to stray from the capital, Maputo, which has greeted him with lovely weather. This is a beautiful seaside capital, and so he can expect to have a very warm welcome here in Mozambique.
Anita, thank you so much for that reporting. Anita Powell reporting live via Skype from Maputo. Now, the African Union is making an effort to preserve the continent's culture in its many forms. Africa 54 managing editor Vincent McCurry recently sat down with Angela Martins, head of the Division of Culture at the African Union. He first asked her what the continental body is doing to retrieve African cultural artifacts that were taken out of Africa by colonizing nations.
We assist the member states. Okay. This is a bilateral issue. But the law is intended to assist countries in this endeavor. And also, we have the Conference of Ministers of Youth, Culture and Sport that meets every 2 years. And in their last meeting, which was held last year, October, in Algeria, they made a decision that they needed a central place where to display or keep the artworks that are returned from the countries where they were looted. So it was agreed that the Great Museum of Africa, which is a flagship project of the African Union Agenda 2063, should be a place where member states could resort to display the artworks that were looted by various countries.
Yes. Talking about the preservation and promotion of the African culture today, across the continent we see disparate things. The countries are many, the people are many, and they have different things they do. How do you define what you're targeting in terms of the culture that you want to preserve?
Culture is everything, so we have to preserve every single element of our culture. So this law again and the charter and the other instruments that we have are basically aimed at assisting us in protecting and promoting, because from North Africa to Southern Africa there's very diversified culture, and then there's an attempt in order to use festivals and gatherings in order to promote and for people to be aware of what is available in each region of the continent. And these instruments will facilitate this knowledge and this sharing of information and sharing of what is happening in one region or another.
How's the challenge of the encroachment of external culture on African culture, and how does the African Union try to mitigate that so that at least the future generation, posterity, can come to appreciate what we've had from times immemorial?
You can put it as a challenge, but it can also be a resort. Of course, we need to promote ours, but we don't say that what is coming from abroad or from everywhere else is always something. It's different. We promote ours, we preserve ours, we have to do that, but also we need to be aware of the global village.
Do you see a role in helping communities and societies and countries kind of be more harmonized, perhaps achieve more understanding and peace?
Of course, we see a very strong role there, but it's still work in progress. We need to promote more our culture so that it plays that role that we all envisage and we all desire, that it becomes the basis for everything else. At this level of creative industries, one industry that we need to really work on it so that it develops as quickly as possible is the cinema, audiovisual and cinema. Having that in mind, the African Union established the African Audiovisual and Cinema Commission, which is an institution which will be hosted by the government of Kenya. And we are working currently with the government in order to make this commission operational.
Tell us a little bit about the upcoming event in Angola and what it's all about.
In Angola, the African Union, UNESCO, and the government of Angola are organizing the Biennale on a Culture for Peace, which is an event happening from 18 to 22nd September in Luanda. The Biennale is mainly to promote the culture for peace, and many member states of the African Union have already confirmed their participation. So basically for these 5 days, we are going to have a lot of people reflecting on this important theme, which is a culture for peace on the continent.
Africa 54 Managing Editor Vincent Makori speaking to Angela Martins, Chief of the Division of Culture at the African Union. We're excited to hear what you think about Africa 54. Join the discussion on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. We're also streaming our broadcast live on Facebook. Please watch and share our show with your friends. Also check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Now coming up, the loans helping cushion Kenyan farmers from huge losses. We'll be back.
Could be French,
English,
Portuguese,
Benton,
Bantu.
Arabic.
It is the beat.
The African beat that counts.
The beat does all the translations.
It cuts across all languages and gives us the understanding that this is the African beat.
It is so distinct
and adhesive.
It binds us together.
African beat on the Voice of America. For more information, visit our website at www.voanews.com/AfricanBeat.
I am Sheikh Sali, host and senior editor of VOA's international call-in talk show, Straight Talk Africa.
Today we'll examine the tobacco industry.
We pretty much touch on anything that you can think of. Politics, health issues, human rights issues, you name it, we talk about it. The issues that we discuss are pertinent to most people on the African continent. A very, very rare and unique opportunity to interact with their leaders.
I'm Clara Frank, and here's what's trending. Actress Priyanka Chopra and her pop star husband Nick Jonas were named the best dressed of 2019 by People magazine. This marks the first time in the celebrity magazine's history that a couple has shared top styling honors. Chopra, 37, is a former Miss World who became a star in both Hollywood and Bollywood, and Jonas, 26, topped People's annual Best Dress list in an eclectic slate. Chopra has also become the first Indian to headline a U.S. television drama series as the star of Quantico. She married the younger of the three Jonas brothers in New Delhi in December 2018. Next up, veganism and sustainability continue to be unstoppable trends in the British food market, including eco-friendly packaging like food wraps made from beeswax. Alcoholic tea and luxury-ready meals are also among the growth products on display at the Specialty and Fine Food Fair at London's Olympia. Another trend here is to have restaurant-quality, high-end food delivered to your door, which you can even pass off as a delicious meal you cooked yourself. Also popular are CBD and hemp-based food and drink products. CBD, or cannabidiol, is an active ingredient in cannabis derived from the hemp plant. Suddenly the chapters are written. And finally, New York Fashion Week is setting a new trend for September with a shorter, more robust schedule. The Council of Fashion Designers of America has dropped the official calendar from 6 days to 5 days and nights. Designers who didn't make the official schedule are considered not developed enough or an international brand that doesn't fit within New York Fashion Week, but could be added in future seasons. Highlights of the week include Tommy Hilfiger and Zendaya's new collection, which will be shown at the Apollo Theater in Harlem. And that's what's trending today.
Cameroon is dispatching 1,000 troops to help bring peace to neighboring Central African Republic. The first contingent of 300 troops departed for CAR on Wednesday. Cameroonian Defense Minister Joseph Betty Assomo says his forces are well trained and will join the United Nations peacekeeping mission of more than 13,000 troops, police and civilians to help restore peace to the Central African Republic. Now, British Prime Minister Boris Johnson is reeling after suffering a series of damaging defeats over the government's Brexit policy on Wednesday. Henry Ridgwell reports from London on the latest twists in Britain's extraordinary Brexit saga.
Outside Parliament, Britain's divisions are laid bare. Here, there is no talk of compromise. Brexit supporters want out now.
We actually voted to leave, and leave we should. We weren't told leave with a deal. That wasn't on the ballot paper. It said leave or remain, and we expect to leave.
EU supporters want Brexit called off entirely.
I'm 82 and a very, very definite Remainer, because we need Europe and Europe needs us. And one of the reasons is I'm old enough to have been around during the Second World War.
Inside Parliament, the political warfare continues. Opposition lawmakers seized control of the House of Commons Wednesday, rushing through a bill to prevent Britain from leaving the EU with no deal on October 31st. The bill was passed with the help of rebel MPs from the ruling Conservative Party, like Nicholas Soames.
It merely seeks to avert the immediate risks of the disaster of a no-Brexit exit on the 31st of October, and it thereby seeks to give the government and this House a further opportunity to achieve a resolution of this profoundly difficult issue.
Soames, the grandson of wartime Prime Minister Winston Churchill, was among 21 Conservative MPs effectively thrown out of the party for voting against the government. The new legislation would require the Prime Minister to go to Brussels and ask for a Brexit extension. He has refused.
If he were to ignore a piece of statute law, he'd have to wind up in the courts. That would have to be adjudicated in the courts, but that would be a terribly un-British thing to do. I mean, people who hold high office ought to obey the rule of law.
Hours after his first defeat, Prime Minister Boris Johnson again failed in his attempt to call a general election Wednesday evening, with opposition lawmakers insisting the legislation blocking no deal must be passed first. Johnson accused opposition Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn of cowardice.
I think he has become the first, to my knowledge, the first leader of the opposition in the democratic history of our country to refuse the invitation to an election.
Johnson could use other parliamentary shortcuts to try to force an imminent election. The Prime Minister received backing Wednesday from his ally across the Atlantic.
He's in there fighting, and he knows how to win. Boris knows how to win.
So far, Johnson has lost 4 votes out of 4. The legislation to block no deal is being debated Thursday in Britain's upper chamber, the House of Lords, where opponents could seek to filibuster the bill. Britain's political meltdown could be turning rapidly into a constitutional crisis. Henry Ridgewell for VOA News, London.
The U.S. military is hoping the newly launched Space Command will improve the defense of America's interests in outer space, and the administration of President Donald Trump hopes it will lead to the creation of a new Space Force. We get the details from VOA Pentagon correspondent Carla Bob.
Signed, sealed, delivered. Space Command is here to defend the military's ultimate high ground.
This is a landmark day, one that recognizes the centrality of space to America's national security and defense.
Space Command is the military's 11th combatant command, each tasked with either a geographic mission or a functional mission.
In RU-12, we have good effects on the ground.
Ground forces are reporting the threat's been neutralized.
Space Command aims to reorganize and improve U.S. space defenses and technologies amid increasing aggression from Russia and China.
Our adversaries are weaponizing Earth's orbits with new technology targeting American satellites that are critical to both battlefield operations and our way of life at home.
The realm of space hits closer than some may realize, essential to everyday activities from navigation to banking. Space assets are also critical to military missions, from launching missiles to collecting intelligence. And administration officials say the command brings them closer to realizing one of the president's major goals.
As a unified combatant command, the United States Space Command is the next crucial step towards the creation of an independent Space Force as an additional armed service.
The Space Force would be the first new military branch since the Air Force was established shortly after World War II. But a future Space Force needs Congress to approve it and fund it. And that hasn't happened yet. Carla Babb, VOA News, Washington.
Kenyan farmers are hoping to benefit from insured loans that will help them buy farm inputs and seeds. Unlike other commercial bank loans, the Risk Contingent Credit Scheme, which is a brainchild of the Washington-based International Food Policy Research Institute, aims to cushion farmers from huge losses accrued from crop failures due to climate change. Sarah Kimani reports from Machakos, Kenya.
On a hot Thursday afternoon in Kenya's Machakos County, farmers go through an agronomy and finance literacy class. This is just before they receive loan vouchers from a local bank that they will use to buy seeds and other supplies.
So for 1 acre, we process for them about 10,000 in terms of the loan, so that they're able to buy fertilizer, they're able to buy certified seeds, and they're also able to buy the necessary chemicals that they need for their crops to grow.
It has not always been this way. Because small-scale agriculture is considered risky and unbankable, farmers are not able to easily get commercial loans. A new credit facility dubbed the Risk Contingent Credit Scheme seeks to help farmers by providing loans to cushion them from the impact of climate change.
When the rain doesn't come, there's no harvest. The farmers don't need to pay back the loans, and the insurance will pay back. Of course, if everything goes well, you have a good harvest, you have to pay back the loans plus the insurance premium.
Beatrice Ndavi is preparing to take a loan. She has seen firsthand the effects of global warming here on her farm. Every season, the harvests are reduced, and in some seasons, she has lost the entire crop.
Most of the farmers in Machakos County, they have a challenge of drought, because when there is a drought, we don't get enough food for our families.
Kenyan government estimates that during the previous 4 droughts between 2008 and 2011, the country lost $12.1 billion. The new loan scheme was first piloted in 2017 when a drought hit the area. Beatrice benefited. That and the agronomy classes have gone a long way in helping farmers like her adapt to the effects of global warming.
Before the bank started giving us loans, I can say that production was very low because we were just using, let's say, the manure alone. But when we started applying these artificial fertilizers, now there has been improvement in the production.
There are plans to replicate the scheme to other arid areas in African countries. Sarah Kimani for VOA News, Machakos.
And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, have a good evening.